All right, I'd like to welcome everyone who's already joined us for CA Football Social Media Day. If you're not asking questions today, if you can mute your lines, that would be very helpful.
I don't know if there's a mic in that.
So we don't bleed over the questions. Obviously, we're going to start this morning with CA Football Commissioner Joe D'Antonio, and then we'll be joined by all 12 head coaches and student athletes. Really looking forward to speaking with them and getting the season underway. Hopefully all of you have received the preseason poll and preseason all-conference team. If not, that's available on our social media outlets as well as casports.com. If you have a question here this morning for any of the coaches or for the commissioner, just use the chat feature and we'll go in order, or you can use the raise your hand feature on the Zoom. Any of those will work, and we'll get questions in. So we begin this morning's proceedings with CA Football Commissioner Joe D'Antonio. Joe, thanks for joining us this morning.
Rob, good morning. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. I'd like to welcome certainly the members of the media that have joined us this morning. Thank you for being with us today and for your continued coverage of CAA football. The conference and our member institutions certainly value the relationship that we have with each and every one of you. And if during the season, either myself, Rob, or any member of our staff can be of assistance, I hope you realize that you can always reach out to us. I'll keep my comments brief because I'm sure there are many questions we want to get to, and I know we're going to try to stay as best we can on schedule today. We have a lot of folks to hear from and a lot to get to. The 2021 football season, in my mind, brings with it a renewed sense of optimism, the excitement to hopefully return to some reasonable level of normalcy, to play a full regular season, to have teams make the playoffs, and certainly within the CAA to compete for the FCS National Championship in Frisco. The season also brings with it, though, the reality that we're still not, as a society, done dealing with the effects of COVID. Likely, we're unfortunately far from it. As a conference, from a protocol standpoint, not much has changed in terms of how we will continue to approach things during the year. We will continue to work extremely closely with our physicians that comprise our return to play task force, as well as our athletic directors, presidents, and other administrators to establish protocols that will allow our student athletes, coaches, and administrators to compete, but certainly to continue to compete in a very safe environment, or as safe environment as we can provide. I do anticipate going forward that we will have testing parameters for those individuals that have not been vaccinated. We haven't finalized those scenarios as of yet, but are working again very closely with our physicians to put those plans in place, and we'll have them in place likely very soon. And I do anticipate as a conference, we, like other conferences around the country, will implement policies and procedures associated with contests that cannot be played. Again, nothing final from the conference just yet on that topic, but hope to have something in place very soon. And when we have that in place, we'll be certain that we share that with the media and our other constituents. So again, real excited to kind of get back to playing football on a regular basis, get back to playing football in the fall. I know our coaches and student athletes are equally excited for that opportunity. Really pleased to be with you today. And Rob, happy to take any questions at this point that folks may have.
All right, thanks, Joe. We'll start with Dave Thomas. Go ahead, Dave.
Good morning, Commissioner. How are you?
Morning, Dave. Great to see you.
You as well. This is a topic you and I have talked about several times in conversations as far as adding members to the CAA. There's so much talk what's going on with Oklahoma, Texas, looking to join us at the SEC. Is there movement amongst FCS schools right now?
Well, I'm not sure if there's specific levels of movement, Dave, but as you and I have talked in the past, and as I've answered this question in the past, membership is certainly always something that we're A, interested in, and B, extremely focused on. So it's not like we just take the membership file, stick it in a cabinet somewhere and never open it at all. It's far from that. So, we're watching the national landscape just like everyone else is at the FBS level, and certainly watching what's going on at our level very closely, and can tell you that it's not a closed file for sure, but just something that we continue to monitor very closely.
Next question, Joe, from Daniel Steenkamer. Go ahead, Daniel.
Morning, Mr. Commissioner. Thanks for your time. We heard from the Big Sky yesterday, the commissioner there, about the Big Sky, the CAA in the Missouri Valley, leading to a discussion for down the road about possible FCS playoff expansion with the addition of 2 new leagues and 2 new automatic bids to the playoff. Would you be able to confirm that you're involved in that discussion, and then also just any more specifics about what that expansion could look like?
Yeah, not real any specifics right now as to what that expansion could look like. I think for the conferences that you've just mentioned, we're certainly trying to take the leadership role within the FCS structure. We've had great discussions in the past with both the NCAA as well as the FCS committee on playoff structure, how teams are seeded, etc. And I would anticipate that those discussions will continue in earnest. I think it's a little premature today to comment on whether or not there may or may not be changes. But very similar to how I answered Dave's last question, those continue to be ongoing discussions all the time, not just this year. We are always looking to make the FCS playoff structure better, and certainly look forward to working with my fellow commissioners in that regard.
Next question from Greg Medea. Go ahead, Greg.
Hey, Joe. To follow up Dave's question, I guess I would just ask, do you anticipate the trickle-down effect reaching the FCS level? And I guess kind of along those lines, do you think about trying to keep current members happy and keeping their memberships strong before, I guess, looking to expand or anything like that?
Well, trickle-down effect is always possible, depending on what movements are actually going to be made. In terms of keeping current membership happy, I think we're very fortunate that we have great leadership within our member institutions in the conference. We've talked about before, top to bottom, we certainly think we have one of, if not the best conference in FCS football. That's a credit to everyone involved, our student athletes, our coaches, our administrators, our presidents, and the 12 member institutions that comprise the CAA football conference. We would hope that all of those members are happy to be members of the conference, but certainly understand that there might be scenarios that could arise in the future where individual institutions need to continue to make decisions that are best for them. And we'll continue to work closely with our membership to make sure that they are happy, they're being serviced at the appropriate level, and that we're competing at a very high level on a national spectrum.
Next question from David Teal. Go ahead, Dave.
Joe, you mentioned that you anticipate having some testing protocol for unvaccinated athletes. Do you have a feeling there at the conference office where your football teams and heck, all your fall sports teams stand in terms of vaccination ratio? William & Mary sent out an email yesterday to the university community saying that only 56% of students were vaccinated.
Yeah, good question, David. I'm going to ask, or I'm going to request members of the media, if you have specific questions relative to vaccination percentages on each of our teams, I think those questions are more appropriately answered and addressed by the individual institutions. What I can tell you from what I've heard in conversations I've been involved in, I anticipate that as we move to the start of the regular season, both within our football conference as well as our full member conference, we will have a very high number of student athletes that are indeed vaccinated. Both individual institutions as well as the conference as a whole are working right now to establish policies, procedures, and protocols for those individuals that are not vaccinated, and in some cases, even those individuals that are vaccinated. So I don't think it's a scenario, David, where you're going to see nobody is being tested, because I do think that both institutionally as well as from a conference standpoint, there will be protocols associated with testing for definitely for unvaccinated student athletes, and even potentially on some of our campuses for vaccinated student athletes. And we will continue to work through those protocols to ensure everyone's safety. I'm 100% not trying to give you a vague answer to the question. I just don't want to start citing percentages that I don't have factual knowledge of. But I will say that my anticipation is that both in our full member conference and our football conference, there will be a very high level of vaccination once we hit the time to play games.
Next question from Chris Heidel. Go ahead, Chris.
Good morning, Joe. Thanks for taking our questions this morning. Hope everything's safe with you and your family. Question
Chris.
for you. With this, in the spring football season, we had an up and down season for the teams and all that stuff with this COVID-19. What did the league learn about the spring to might help get things ready for the fall?
Well, we learned quite a bit in terms of the management of testing protocols, the implementation of testing protocols. Some of those scenarios will be carried into the fall. Some of them, I think, we've been very fortunate to be able to leave behind, because I do think as a society, we are in a different spot right now. Let's hope that we're not returning to where we were a year ago. And I'd like to think a higher level of vaccination is helping with that. So I think, Chris, the best way to answer the question is we certainly took a lot away in terms of our testing protocols and our COVID protocols. Some of those will be implemented as we go forward to continue to ensure the health and safety and well-being of our student athletes, coaches, and administrators. Some of those things that we don't need anymore will fall by the wayside. And we'll continue to stay vigilant in making sure that everyone's safety is our top priority.
Joe, your next question from Dave Peck. Go ahead, Dave.
Morning, Joe. You may have touched on this a little bit in the intro, but I was wondering if there was any plan in place for makeup games as a result of COVID or contact tracing, and whether that changes at all, including sidelining of players for vaccinated team/players or unvaccinated team/players.
Yeah, it's a good question, Dave. We are preparing for some meetings that are coming up with our athletic directors here in the next week or so. We've had some preliminary conversations. I've had some preliminary one-on-one conversations with a few of our athletic directors about that matter. I'm not able to share those conversations today, but I do feel as though we are on track to have a policy in place relative to everything that you've just mentioned. Things such as what happens if a game needs to be canceled? What is the result of that? Is it a forfeit? Is it a no contest? Is there a chance it could be rescheduled? I think all those questions remain right now on the table for discussion. We know that time is of the essence here a little bit, but I anticipate in the very near future, we'll have those issues ironed out, and we'll be happy to share the result of those conversations, certainly with you folks at the right time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joe, follow-up question from Dave Thomas. Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, Commissioner, since we had spring football and there were really very few fans, everyone leaned on Flo Sports. You're entering year 3 of this contract. What can you tell us about what you've observed from Flo Sports? Are you happy with how things are going and how things are being performed? And what could we see from this contract moving forward into this fall season?
Well, Flo continues to be a great partner for the conference. I think it's important for everyone to know that there has been some confusion over the years. Flo Sports is not producing any of our games. The games are produced by our member institutions and are shown on the Flo Sports platform. We continue, I think, to head in the right direction as it relates to all of our institutions, upping the ante as it relates to the individual production of those games. And that's a credit, I think, to all 12 of our schools that have been able to ensure a greater level of professionalism and production in all of their contests going forward, especially here in the sport of football. So happy, Dave, with the relationship that we have with Flo. Really happy that our institutions are stepping up from a production standpoint, and certainly looking forward to year 3 of our partnership.
One last one for you, Joe, from Wayne Epps. Go ahead, Wayne.
All right, good morning. I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned earlier, as far as just like some positives that may stay from this past season, and some positives that may be okay to kind of go away with this fall. What's the process like of kind of deciding, okay, this may be the most important to keep? These are some things we will be okay with kind of doing away with this fall, and what are maybe some examples of some of those things that you may not feel like you may not need, but or may want to keep in the fall, as far as some of the COVID protocols?
Well, I think the process, Wayne, as I addressed in my opening comments, really remains just continuing to have very pointed conversations with our return to play task force. Just so this group is clear, our return to play task force is comprised of the team physician from each of our 12 football member institutions. On the full member side, we have a return to play task force that's comprised of the team physicians from our 10 full member institutions. And we've been very calculated in both last year and now coming into this year in working very closely with that group to establish our policies and procedures. Some of those policies and procedures are going to carry over. For example, without getting specific, because nothing's been finalized yet, I fully anticipate, as I said, that we will have a testing protocol as it relates to unvaccinated student athletes. That testing protocol will likely mirror some of the testing protocols that we had in place during the spring. Part of that testing protocol was that each institution, prior to playing their game on either a Thursday, because we have a couple Thursday games at the beginning, or playing their games on Saturday, needed to submit an attestation form to the conference office attesting that they had met all of the testing protocols the conference had put in place. So when you talk about something that's carrying over, I fully anticipate that the attestation form aspect of what we did last year will also carry over into the fall. You know, we had policies and procedures in place last year associated with, you had mentioned at the beginning of your comments, fans being in attendance, buffer zones around certain areas of the stadium. You know, those are some things just based on how our campuses are looking at this and how society, I think, is now approaching sporting events. I mean, you're watching the same stuff I'm watching. Major League Baseball games, NHL playoff games, NBA playoff games. Our stands are back to being basically in full capacity. So some of those protocols that we learned a lot from last year, right now we likely will not need as we begin the season. But we will continue to monitor things very closely. And if there's a time and place that we have to bring some of those protocols back, we'll bring them back. Because again, I can't stress enough, there's nothing more important to what we do than the safety of our student athletes, coaches, and administrators. A game's a game. Somebody's life is somebody's life, and we're never going to take risks with those types of decisions.
All right, Joe, thanks so much for your time this morning. For media members, we've got to stay on our schedule here, but if anybody would like to get with the commissioner further, just let me know and we'll try to line that up. So, Joe, thanks for taking time with us this morning.
Thanks, Rob. Really great to see everyone. Thanks to everyone again for being with us. It's truly appreciated.
All right, we begin our